but what are you going to do?
It's fine.
I forgot to tell you that I watched, I watched Buckethead. What is it called? Cuphead.
You watched Cuphead?
Yeah, I watched Cuphead.
The video game?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, I thought that was pretty cool. I just, I thought the animation was neat. I like that.
Isn't it cute?
I liked the premise, the song.
Yeah. So why were you watching it?
Because you had said something about it, and so I wanted to see what it was about when you said that it had 1920s art.
What were you watching? I mean, what were you watching it like?
Oh, I guess
like,
it was
happening?
Maybe the trailer or something. So it had the theme song and then what the game was about, and so I thought that was kind of neat. And there's little like spooky elements to it too.
Yeah, there's like little ghosties, and then it's called "Don't Deal with the Devil," and so you have to like collect soul contracts.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. Oh, I'm really starting. Okay.
Oh, hey everybody. You're listening to Creep It Real. I forgot what we were doing here today.
We're not just hanging out. We were.
Yeah, we were. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Bianca.
And we're Creep It Real.
I was gonna let it go this week.
No.
So this week we are gonna keep it short and sweet, and we are presenting to you another highly requested topic: the Bridgewater Triangle. We're going to talk a little bit about the places in the Bridgewater Triangle and the apparitions, UFOs, cryptids, etc. associated with them. There are quite a few references for this episode, which we will put into the show notes for you if you're interested at all. But I did want to talk briefly about one of the books I read, which was called Ghosts of the Southcoast by Tim Weisberg, which I really loved because he talks about why places are haunted and includes the history of each and every area. And I think that's pretty paramount to unexplained phenomena.
I referenced a few different books. Hockomock, Place Where the Spirits Dwell by Peter Towe, Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle by Christopher Balzano, and The Creature from the Bridgewater Triangle and Other Strange Tales by Bill Russo. And all of them were really great. The Hockomock one was really interesting because it really went deep into history, the history of the Hockomock Swamp, which we're going to talk about pretty extensively today. And before we start, we just want to request listener stories. If you have any kind of story, any paranormal kind of story, we're talking from UFOs to shadow people to Bigfoot. I mean, literally any type of supernatural phenomena that you have encountered in your life, we want you to tell us that story with your very own voice, and we're going to talk to you, record that, and then you're going to be featured on a episode telling us your story. Actually, shoot us an email or a message on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook if you do have a story. We've gotten a few people so far, and we're going to set up times with everybody and call you, talk to you, get your story told.
But we do want it like done in kind of a narration type of way so that you really are saying your story and we're not like,
and then what happened? Oh, how interesting.
you know what I mean?
We're going to make it as spooky as possible.
Yeah. The Bridgewater Triangle is an area of about 200 square miles within southeastern Massachusetts and is claimed to be a very hot site of paranormal phenomena, ranging from UFOs, poltergeists, orbs, balls of fire, spectral phenomena, Bigfoot-like sightings, giant snakes, and thunderbirds.
Many of the best-known encounters took place in the 70s and 80s, not to say that they haven't continued to this day, but these times of intense paranormal activity are called flaps, and this particular flap was not solely focused on Bridgewater, but it was one of the most active areas during that time. And a lot of the stories that we're going to tell today took place during the 70s, like the big stories are going to take place during that time, but there's others that are more recent.
As we know, it is believed that if an event of enough magnitude happens in a certain area, that location can be imprinted upon by the energies surrounding the event. This particular area of New England is stuffed with events of this nature, two of which include bloody wars, the Revolutionary War and King Philip's War, which was between the natives of the area and the English colonists. There are countless stories of paranormal experiences, so we're definitely going to miss quite a few of them, but maybe we can come back to them in the future and do another paranormal Bridgewater.
Yeah.
The term Bridgewater Triangle first came into existence when cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman was investigating the area in the late 70s. And of course, the Bermuda Triangle was a very well-known mysterious spot in which many ships and aircraft were said to have disappeared. Lauren essentially wanted to coin a phrase that resonated with people and would come to be known as the Bermuda Triangle's counterpart. The vertices of the triangle include the towns of Abington, Freetown, and Seekonk.
I don't know what that sounds like.
I don't know what it sounds like either.
It's funny.
Something else I found interesting about the area was that Christopher Balzano, who Ashley just mentioned, she read his book, who was another researcher of the area, also made mention that the area has unusually high rates for both crime and mental illness. Mm-hmm. But that was something I was like, I don't know, could it just be a condensed area of people? And then also I was like, how many other 200 square mile radiuses have been covered in order to make that observation?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what's the...
But it's possible. I think I talk about it a little. I'm not positive.
Okay. And anyways, I just thought it was interesting. Much prior to English settlement, this area was considered to have a certain power associated with it to the Wampanoags, who are the natives to the area.
And they were part of the Algonquin tribe.
At the heart of the triangle is the Hockomock Swamp, named by the Wampanoag people, meaning the place where spirits dwell.
And this is typically what the name has been interpreted as throughout history. But if you break the word down, you have Hock, which means body, and Comock, which means structure or enclosure, making a more literal, which is the only way my brain works, which we just discussed on Patreon.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
More literal definition of Hockomock to mean body enclosure or a place where the bodies are on structures. Regardless, the general idea is the same. It's a place where they buried their dead. The Hockomock region roughly includes 43 cities and towns, and historically the swamp was used as the place, like I just said, where the Wampanoag tribe, the easternmost branch of the Algonquins, buried their dead. It is located just 30 miles south of Boston, and today is made up of nearly 17,000 acres, making it the largest in New England, and is used recreationally by hunters, fishermen, and various other outdoorsmen.
Its surroundings are pretty dense, making it very difficult to navigate, and it is believed that certain creatures lurk in the swamp undetected.
Yeah, the land's pretty much just kind of like, it's pretty wild for the most part.
The Hockomock is occasionally referred to as the Hockomock, who is also the chief deity of death and disease that the Wampanoag both worshipped and feared.
While these two words, Hockomock and Hockomock, translate into two very different things, the names are given for a good reason. Hockomock was the Wampanoag's name for the evil god of death and disease, like Bianca just said, composed of the souls of the human dead. And Hockomock was known to congregate in large numbers in swamps, and most especially in the Hockomock Swamp.
The Hockomock Swamp was used as a fortress by the Wampanoag against invasion by early English settlers and played a role in King Philip's War as a strategic base of operations to launch assaults on nearby English settlements.
When the English pilgrims came to Plymouth in 1620, the local Wampanoags worshipped approximately 38 gods, including the creator that they called Cotonowit, though their main god and the one that they turned to the most was Hockomock. At this time, the Wampanoags were lying in constant terror of this evil deity for a number of reasons, one being that they continuously frightened them, particularly at night, in the form of apparitions of their most feared enemies, warriors of the Mohawk tribe and various mythical creatures. That doesn't sound too pleasant, if you ask me. Early English writers made note that even the brave Wampanoag warriors were so afraid of these apparitions that they refused to leave their weetus, or huts, to travel after sunset. This was true even in the most dire situations, such as when they were under the threat of attack, which I'd say, if that's true, is pretty significant. I mean, that's superstition, I know, taken to the nth degree. Yes. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't know why I always say that.
Like, what are we going to see?
We'll find out soon. We'll find out soon if this is real. Another reason they lived in terror of these deities was because of their shamans who broker the power to the Hockomock using a combination of supernatural powers they get from the entity, along with medicinal and psychological methods to heal. Conversely, the shamans would also use these powers to kill their own personal enemies and the enemies of the tribe, and to increase their stature in the community, like we talked about in our Skinwalker episode. But due to all this, the Pilgrims equated Hockomock with the devil, which definitely set the tone for the area to them. Considering that the settlers organized a church before they formed a civil government, it's safe to say that they placed their religious interests over their material welfare and comfort, and that little devil detail was probably pretty serious.
I'm sure it was. Of course. Of course they organized a church before they formed a government. Why wouldn't you?
Well, you know. It doesn't take too much to imagine what a significant divide there must have been between the pagan Wampanoags and the puritanical Pilgrims who their leader sold the Hockomock Swamp to in 1645. I would say it's a huge one. Even though then they would just steal probably half their stuff.
Regardless.
Yes. 30 years later, in 1675, the son of the Wampanoags' leader, known to the English as King Philip, set out to reclaim the land through military force. The ensuing conflict, known as King Philip's War, was directly influenced by King Philip's shamans, just as his father's decisions had been influenced and his father's before him. Philip's war chief was Tispaquin, a shaman whose brutal attacks on the villages of the English settlers were, according to him, directly influenced by the dreams and visions he received from the evil deity Hockomock. The English also felt their part in the war with the Wampanoag was their Christian duty, as they believed that they were battling the forces of the devil.
Because anything that's not Abrahamic is of the devil.
Of course.
Jesus Christ.
The absolutely brutal way that the war was carried out by both sides resulted in the highest number of deaths in a local population of any war in American history, and I bet you, lots of you, haven't even heard of it before.
I hadn't.
Neither had I. It pretty nearly annihilated the Native American population and culture in the area, and sadly, it served as a model for similar situations around the country as American exploration expanded.
Euro-American settlers in the 18th and 19th centuries deemed the swamp to be worthless, barren land, and even tried to drain it to convert it into profitable farmland.
I bet that's going to work well.
Which is so sad because the natives of the region had placed a higher value on the swampland itself, just kind of like having a more revered status to them.
Yes.
And they hunted game there as well.
Right. And also, it's funny, it's just like old white men to say, let me change the way this earth has been since time
The dawn of
began.
time, yeah.
Or, since the great floods that created the swampland.
Because I can't make any profit on it. Cool.
Because I don't know how.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't learned how. Yeah.
Exactly.
Due to all these factors, it's safe to assume that the Hockomock Swamp was a strong spiritual center for the Wampanoag during the war, leading to a strong imprint of that energy on the land. As we have seen, and we are yet to cover, but we will soon, the ghosts of the Gettysburg area.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Just the Civil War ghost in general. I mean, that is something that is the most compelling footage that I've ever seen.
For sure.
Death comes in many forms and seems to almost plague the area. A significant killer in the area comes from mosquitoes in the form of triple E, or Eastern Equine Encephalitis, a deadly disease that erupted in the 50s and still has no cure to this day. And while you might be like, what does this have anything to do with the triangle? This is just some of the very bizarre, negative situations that arise in this area that are you don't have a cure to this day for this encephalitis from these fucking mosquitoes, but god damn it, are mosquitoes the worst things that have ever
in the
lived.
world?
I mean,
just in the world.
Get lost. I got bit by mosquitoes that itched for 2 weeks.
No, I don't have time for it.
There are many cases of disappearances, suicides, torture, and apparitions that are pretty much identical to the ones the Wampanoag said that they were terrorized by in the early 1600s, and that is to this day. As the writer of one of the books that I referenced, Hockomock, Places Where the Spirits Dwell, Peter, what was his name? Oh, well, we're on first name basis. Peter Towe wrote in his book, there are many, there are many credible witnesses to unexplainable events in this region. Unfortunately, unlike the Wampanoags or traditional
Rural is a very difficult word.
What's that? Rural, the joke. It was on a show. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Someone knows out there screaming at the radio. The radio.
Oh my God, what are you, 80?
I am 80. I'm 80 in the body of a 35-year-old sex kitten. Unfortunately, unlike the Wampanoags or traditional rural villagers of rural England, Ireland, or Scotland, whose community were sympathetic to and supported those who claimed to experience paranormal phenomena in their social groups at the time, nowadays, witnesses are publicly ostracized as liars and lunatics for reporting anything they witness. As he says, This common practice is not just a great injustice to the witnesses, but also the rest of us, for it fosters ignorance by allowing us to safely dismiss what may be a vital part of our quest as humans to better understand our world and our place in the cosmos. Preach it! Yes!
Because why stifle their...
I'm saying that because to make people who come forward with stories of their experiences feel like they're crazy or stupid makes us not be able to explore what actually might be out there in the world, in the universe.
Fair. I just when I hear like okay, so my feelings on like those types of events are like I take it with a really big grain of salt. Like I don't want to immediately give credence to it because I'm like I want evidence. I'm a very evidence-based person.
And I am too. I do think that you need to be able to like back your shit up. Yeah. But I also think that to be instantly dismissive is what they're talking about. And I think that's a really big problem with a lot of people. Sure. Either because they're scared and they don't want that thing to be real, so they don't want to talk about it as it's real. But don't make people feel, just like with your children. Like when I hear stories about hauntings and stuff where kids say, I told my parents that there was a man grabbing me in my bed for 3 years when I was a child and nobody said anything. And they told me I was just dreaming or whatever. Let's take what they're saying as what they are experiencing. And then from there, we can try to figure out if it's, you know, in their mind, if something is actually going on that we can't explain. But don't just be like,
yeah, so what I was going to say is I usually want to give people a grain of salt. Like I want to take those stories with a grain of salt. But, like, there are certain things, unexplained events that have been told and told and told again. And I'm like, well, why is that the case? But
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I think that it's funny because I was way, way, way more skeptical before I was immersed in research.
Right.
Every waking hour of my life when I'm not at work. And then I was like, oh, wait, there's too many... And I mean, everybody that listens to the show knows how many times I've said this, but there's too many coincidences. There's too many circumstances that are the same throughout various stories, throughout the world, throughout time. It's just, there's got to be something. Where there's smoke, there's fire. The older I get, the more true that statement becomes.
Yeah.
Really.
Fair.
Okay. All right. Dighton Rock was known to the Wampanoag as Talking Rock. It is America's oldest and most famous archaeological artifact you've probably never heard of. In 1916, Professor Edmund Burke, Delabar of, Burke Ramsey is all, we don't like any Burkes around here. Delabar of Brown University, who is the rock's foremost researcher, said that no single object of antiquarian interest in America has been so much discussed probably as Dighton Rock. Yet, I know none of us have heard of it.
That's strange.
The rock is located at a little-known state museum on the banks of the Taunton River, and it actually sounds quite amazing, the whole setup. It's like, what a delightful place to set a museum up on the side of a river. In the rural town of Berkeley, Massachusetts, maybe, who knows if that's so beautiful, I'm not sure. For thousands of... We'll see. That's our catchphrase. We'll see. For thousands of years, it lay partially exposed in the shallows of the river and acted as a visual marker for early inhabitants of the region and European explorers coming up the Taunton. It is a massive sandstone boulder inscribed with countless faint lines and symbols, and it is an important part of U.S. history as it helps provide clues as to who truly first discovered and settled in America. I know this for some may not be like the thrilling paranormal episode that you're hoping for, but it is very important to talk about like where these things originated and how far back they go. Yeah. The area where the rock is located was important to the Wampanoag people as it was where they were located and remained. They refused to sell it to the settlers even as they sold all the land around it, and they were pressured to sell the rest on numerous occasions. There are many theories regarding the origins of the inscription on the rock, ranging from Phoenicians to Portuguese to Vikings. But at this point, it is not known who exactly made these inscriptions. There's faint lines and symbols all over this rock that they're saying go back beyond.
That's so cool, dude. That's like the Rosetta Stone of like the United States.
Right.
That's amazing.
And we don't know anything about it.
Oh, that's even more compelling.
But yeah, so, it's there. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that we probably don't even think about going and visiting. I would love to see this.
Oh, dude, totally. Oh,
but
God,
so that history, is what helps create this whole, like, there's so much that went on in this area that we don't even know. Like, they don't even know. It could have been Vikings that settled America, in this area. It definitely wasn't old Columbus. That's
No.
for sure. At least we know that
Old
much.
Columbus.
Okay, so
So one of the first sightings of UFOs in the United States
history.
was described as having occurred on May of 1760, but I really couldn't find any information at all on the event. They say, there's like reports say that a UFO sighting happened in May of 1760. And
What
I'm like,
could it have been? Like, other than a comet, I guess.
I mean, they describe it as like a fire in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Fire in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
But there, again, couldn't find anything. Like anything on the actual event. So
Well, I'm not real surprised.
I'm not either. But this 1908 Bridgewater UFO they're going to talk about, I could find some stuff on, and you have all the information on. So I'm excited to hear. I'm actually excited for you to go into it.
I was excited to see a 1908 UFO sighting. So
On
Halloween.
Yes.
Yes. At 3:10 in the morning, which make a mental note of that time because
Witching hour.
things happen. Witching hour or not, whatever it is, there's something like if you start to pay attention to people's experiences of paranormal activity of various sorts.
And your own experiences.
In your own. That's a common theme where I was like, I used to be like, okay. And then now it's like, wait a second. That person's at 3 o'clock
yeah.
too? What the hell?
Yeah,
So anyway, at 3:10 in the morning on Halloween 1908, John Flynn and Philip Prophet were transporting a body for a funeral the following morning in West Bridgewater. They saw something in the sky that absolutely stunned them. A very bright light, like a lantern, hovering low in the sky up ahead of them, over an ironworks factory. It was a time period in history known as the airship era, where balloonists far outnumbered planes, which were still very much experimental at that point. Considering the first successful flight took place a mere 5 years earlier, aviation wasn't exactly advanced, and they knew it was no plane in the sky, so they assumed it was some kind of insane balloon head going out at night to balloon over the swamp, which I'm sure was not a safe activity. Mm-hmm. The two men watched as the craft dropped lower and lower, suddenly, and began moving methodically as though it was being controlled by an outside force. It went up and down and then in a circle, which especially back then was unheard of. According to Flynn in a story with the Times, he said, "We saw the light, not exactly a searchlight, but an unusually strong lantern of some sort over the Stanley Works. We stopped the team for 10 minutes, watched it, and saw it was moving and coming nearer and nearer to Earth. At last, with the stars bright and occasional bits of light from the lantern, we caught a glimpse of the shape of the balloon. We shouted toward it, but heard no response or sound of any sort."
Can you imagine? Just like a bunch of people shouting towards the UFO.
What are you doing? But you gotta think, like, when I said that they stopped their team, it was a team of horses because they're in a carriage. So this isn't like, this is like completely unusual. They're just thinking it's somebody up in a balloon that's gonna say, "We're just out here looking at the stars." Yeah, so...
The UFOs, if it was the UFOs, we're like,
the fuck is this fucking 1908 motherfucker doing? So yeah, they didn't get any response back from the UFO, and the balloon dropped down and the light moved about, perhaps as though they were trying to get their bearings. Then it slowly rose and moved directly off to the east. He said he was able to watch the light receding for more than a half hour and noted his surprise that although the craft had to be nearing the sea at that point, it didn't seem to drop down at all, as though it was attempting to land, which it would surely need to do before going over the water after being in the air for so long, because it was a goddamn, in his eyes, balloon.
Right.
The two men were described in all accounts as being on legitimate business, of their right mind, sober, and, just normal guys.
Fine.
Yes. They were working.
God-fearing men.
Of course, yes. The kind that you want to be telling stories. Although residents did collectively admit to a creepy feeling that came from the incident, they inevitably chalked it all up to a balloon originating from the Brockton Fairgrounds, describing the person as a lunatic sailing a balloon around in the middle of the night, dragging an anchor along with it, threatening to essentially claw-hand any of them up in the middle of the night to a mysterious hiding place, which for some reason in their head was definitely more believable than an alien.
That's fine. As long as it's, what I feel like? It's like, as long as it's a man or a person that's doing it.
It's better than an alien.
Yeah, it's better.
Sure. The very same night the two men witnessed the craft, the Daily Brockton, Massachusetts Enterprise wrote that high above this town in Bridgewater, a big passenger balloon equipped with a powerful light was seen floating between 3 and 4 o'clock this morning. It may have been the same mysterious airship that has been reported as seen at night in various parts of New England the past 2 months. So obviously this was something that was being seen
over and over
yes,
again.
Here and there all over the state. The rival paper, the Brockton Times, wrote on the same day, why a balloon should be seen over Bridgewater this morning is a peculiarly is that how you say that?
Yep.
Hard question to answer, and went on to describe in detail the paper's unsuccessful attempts in conjunction with the Associated Press to identify the craft. They accounted for all the balloons in the area and then concluded that there were no other known balloons in that part of the country that could have reached Bridgewater without traveling a part of the time by day and being plainly seen and reported for many miles beforehand and after. They noted, the balloon appears capable of speed and directness of travel which are out of the ordinary, and suggest that it might be fitted with a power-driven fan or propeller, but none who have seen it ever heard any sounds indicating the presence of machinery. So there's no propulsion noises heard in 1908. I find that to be a little hard to believe if it was a man-made craft, unless it's, military or something that we just don't know about.
But even then.
Yeah, even then.
Oh.
So there are a few problems with the balloon theory beside the fact that all balloons in the area that had taken flight that day were accounted for, but a search throughout southeastern Massachusetts, I have a hard time saying that, don't I? Massachusetts revealed no further trace of the thing whatsoever, seeming to disappear into thin air, if it was even there at all. Even more glaring is that none of the witnesses supported the balloon theory whatsoever. Flynn even wrote into the Brockton Times to dispute their choice of phrasing in their story, if they're using the term hot air balloon, saying, this statement is untrue and I have absolute proof of it. I could see the outline of the large bag and it could not have been a hot air balloon, for it remained stationary and then moved up or down, seemingly at the will of some individual. So obviously his choice of words of saying bag is just because he has no idea, and his only frame of reference is a balloon. But he's like, I am telling you right now, that was no balloon.
Yeah.
I find that whole story to be very compelling. And these guys were just like adamant, like, no, motherfucker, that's not what I saw. I thought that was pretty cool. So this other hotspot in the area is Grassy Island. It's just over an acre and roughly triangular in shape. It lays about 924 feet north of Dighton Rock's original resting place on the east bank of the Taunton River, in the shallows known as Smith's Cove. I swear these directions and stuff, like these descriptions of places, are almost like the military.
I was going to say mythical.
Yeah, like the military's little like, yes,
yes. Well, to me it sounded like just north of the blah, 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 blah river and east of
just past
something,
the ferries,
something rock.
The
yes,
ferries
exactly.
Garden.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay.
But
okay. So it lays just off of Assonet Neck.
I think.
The peninsula, which was sacred to the Native Americans and now divides the Assonet and Taunton rivers and forms the southeastern portion of the town of Berkeley. There are reports dating back to 1905 to 1910 describing a pocket of Native American relics that had been discovered on the island and removed. Many of these artifacts could be found simply scattered on the beaches at low tide. Others were discovered by digging into the earth in places where it was exposed on the edges of the existing peat that was eroding due to storms. Archaeologists believed that the artifacts were from a village site, but the fact that they were found well below the eroding peat meant that the artifacts were not from any known history and had to be either prehistoric or pre-Algonquin, which is extremely old. And it's crazy that you're finding these things scattered about just below one layer of peat, which I was like, what is peat? I thought it was moss.
I don't know what peat is now that you said that, because I thought it was moss too.
But obviously whatever it is sturdy enough that it's been harboring all of these artifacts since way before time. The artifacts ranged from crudely made tools to pure graphite to small red ochre particles, giving them some understanding of who these people were, and then the bones were discovered. They were in a small, disc-shaped mass, all 2 inches or smaller, and some were so tiny that they fell through a sifter. Oh. There were hundreds and hundreds of these bones, and they were isolated. But oddly, there was a complete absence of teeth in these bones, which are the hardest part of a skeleton and would have been there even through fire, which the bones did show signs of exposure to. It was estimated the bones were from a Native American from somewhere between 10 to 1500 years ago, and after further research, it was determined that the island was abandoned due to sea level rise no later than 924 AD.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Prominent archaeologists eventually concluded that, beyond question, an ancient Indian camp of considerable proportions for the section of New England was once located on the surface beneath the peat. Their calculations determined that the island was inhabited sometime around 425 AD and was likely abandoned sometime around 1200 AD. So, that's a lot. That's a long fucking time before America was discovered, everybody.
Yeah, before it was discovered. Yeah, I mean, at least 300 years. At least before, Christopher Columbus discovered it. The land where people were already living.
And it had been for thousands of fucking years.
In April of 1970, Bridgewater had transformed into suburbia and was reeling at the time from a combination of war, drugs, and wild dogs.
Wild dogs!
Just a few months prior, the United States government, announced the end to Project Blue Book.
Shout out Project Blue Book.
Essentially telling the people living in the Bridgewater Triangle to suck it up and move along when they had their numerous encounters with unexplainable phenomena in the sky. The Manson family was on trial for murders in the same year, and a widespread concern for the occult and cults was prevalent in many places across the United States.
If you ask me, it seems like a lot of people are a little too concerned with that nowadays.
Crime rates were rising, and people were already on edge, and then something even more frightening and bizarre gripped the area, the aforementioned wild dogs.
Who let them dogs out?
Oh my god, Ashley. I'm gonna kill. I'm gonna die. Crazed packs of wild domestic dogs were terrorizing the streets. And while it may sound somewhat paranormal in and of itself, it was actually due to the fact that there were no leash laws in Bridgewater and the surrounding towns, and the aggression usually arose from male dogs chasing a bitch in heat.
Whoa, don't talk about me like that.
Ashley! In time, the dogs grew to be actually wild and formed vicious hunting packs that posed a real threat to residents.
It was at this time, on April 8th, 1970, when Bridgewater police received Barry Horton's call describing a hairy monster in the newly renovated digs at the old Bridgewater Academy building. Horton reported a creature well over 7 feet tall, crossing the service road at Route 28, seemingly far bigger and more powerful than any man. I don't know about that. I've seen some fine men that can handle a lot of big, powerful men out there. Entirely covered in brown hair, they walked on 2 legs across the highway and then quickly dropped out of sight as it entered the woods.
Wait, I have a question about that powerful than any man situation. How do you know? How do you know it's more powerful than any man?
Have you ever seen somebody where you're just like, that man is the most powerful man I've ever seen?
No.
That's how I felt about Henry Cavill on Mission Impossible Fallout.
Fair.
Now on Amazon Prime for $2.99 or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
It's okay. So he quickly dropped out of sight the thing quickly dropped out of sight as it entered the woods that stretched between Bedford and South Street. Still shaking, Horton got into his car, he was already there. He got his car and gear and drove home, where he immediately called the police to tell them the story. The police brought out bloodhounds, which were the very same ones that had been used to chase Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, when he escaped Bridgewater Hospital 3 years earlier. And fled to the swamp. Any inmate that escaped never got that far. The dogs would run them down, and they would be found shivering or crying or both, torn up from the briars and beat up by the swamp. The police responding to Horton's monster call were no strangers to calls about mysterious monsters either. It had only been a few months earlier that they had responded to a similar call near the Great Hill dormitory of the college, less than 3 miles from where Horton reported seeing this hairy beast. In the call made 3 months earlier by the students, the Bridgewater police were able to pick up some sort of tracks, but were ultimately unable to catch the creature that they named the Great Hill Monster. That day, responding to Horton, the cops had initially let the residents of the area know that there was a bear on the loose. A couple patrolmen found some tracks in the woods that they were able to follow, but eventually led nowhere, which sounds all too familiar. In the meantime, calls from other frightened residents of the South Street area were calling 911, reporting seeing the bear as well, though they simply described it as something dark-colored or black, quite large, running through their yards. In the end, the large hairy creature made a much better escape than any of the escapees from Bridgewater Hospital, and by the following morning, there were no more reported sightings of the creature at all. For the record, there are no grizzlies or brown bears located within the Bridgewater Triangle, and at least there should not be. At the time, there were only 100 recorded black bears in the entire state of Massachusetts, and they were all thought to be in the western part of the state. And while that doesn't hold true today, where there are now over 3,000 black bears roaming all throughout the state, all the way to Cape Cod, back then that was the case. So, what was it that Horton and the others saw? What kind of bear would walk across a highway on two legs, which is an act I think they typically reserve for scoping shit out or reaching something high or, waving to people that were driving by. You
Little
see
baby
that
bears,
little GIF?
yeah.
That giant,
GIF? I'm sorry,
giant,
did you just call a GIF a GIF?
Gosh, I get in arguments about this. I thought it was a GIF.
Okay, so hold on. The creator of this, it's called like graphics interface something or other, said it was pronounced GIF. But if it's graphics interface something or other,
I think I read that. See, I took it.
That doesn't
literally
even make sense.
Went.
That doesn't even make sense.
So
I
anyway,
mean, it's fine, but
the one where
it's
the
fine.
bear just like sits up and waves. Have you seen that? Oh God, it's so funny.
It's so cute.
Anyway,
if only they weren't mean creatures.
well, if we're being honest with ourselves here, doesn't this sound awfully familiar to a Sasquatch?
Yes, and they're
Yes.
peaceful as hell too.
Some.
For more about their peaceful nature, go listen to the Bumblebutts talk about
Sex with Sasquatch?
Bent over by
Go join the
Bigfoot.
Bumblebutts Patreon and ours.
and ours though.
First ours.
Sorry,
We'll show you our tits. Just kidding.
but we might though.
But they're great, so who knows? They don't get seen enough. Okay. So a farmer in the area decided to do some digging on his property to see if he would be able to find any of the rumored ancient artifacts that could possibly be buried on his land. He asked himself where Native Americans may have lived on his property, and then he and his son began to dig. They uncovered tools, an old foundation, and the most prized find was a large black blade, which was incredibly thin and obviously the work of a highly skilled craftsman. The material it was made from, black chert, is only found near Lake Champlain in Vermont or across the lake in New York, not in Hockomock, which suggested that the archaic people living on the land back in the day had advanced trading networks stretching far north, and who knows what kind of stuff was going on these lands. I've realized, what I realized while I was reading about this stuff was pretty much every single topic that we do that's not like true crime all leads back to either Native American legend, African legend. It's like, oh, okay. Basically, what I'm doing is giving myself the excuse to study all the stuff that I've been fascinated by in a whole way that was unexpected because it all leads back to that
The
stuff.
same thing.
Yeah,
Right.
It's crazy. Well, not crazy, but it's amazing. I love it. The next thing that's seen in this area, the Thunderbird.
So the Ford Thunderbird, colloquially called the T-Bird, is a nameplate that was used by Ford from model years 1955 to 1997.
Take my T-Bird away.
Personal luxury car. I'm just kidding. Go. Giant bird-like creatures that people have witnessed for thousands of years, going back all the way to 1673.
That's a long fucking time.
In conjunction with violent storms. Modern day sightings report something that is typically 6 to 8 feet tall, dark, with a large grotesque beak, and an immense wingspan of 12 to 16 feet.
Before the beak, you had me.
Oh my god, 6 to 8 feet tall and dark.
That's all I needed.
People typically think they're looking at a small plane until it moves in a way that only a living thing does. And their next thought is always, but birds don't get that big, do they?
Well,
Do they? The Native Americans of the United States and Canada have a mythological tradition rich with lore about these creatures. Most tribes believed that thunderbirds were nature spirits, a cross between a biological creature and the divine.
Isn't that crazy that it mentioned this? And I just talked to you and Phil about nature spirits on Patreon the other day.
They referred to them as thunderbirds because they usually appeared and disappeared with violent storms that brought strong rain, thunder, lightning, and winds. It was believed that the bird created the storms by flapping its wings and the lightning by opening and closing its eyes. Girl, that's like me when I'm on a tirade.
It's funny because if you've ever watched Man Seeking Woman, Eric Andre has this, I forget what it's called, something eyes, where he has these little like spinny eyes that shoot out light and like transfix women to make them fall in love with them.
In most tribal tradition, they're considered a benevolent and wise spirit, even a protector of man. They sometimes referred to it as grandfather, and they were generally revered.
The Plains Sioux version of the Thunderbird lived in the sacred Black Hills. They were led by the great Thunderbird, Wakinyan Tonka. They believed it had saved them from a race of water monsters that had tried to drown them in ages past. This is thought by anthropologists to be remarkably similar to the ideas held by the Algonquin tribe, which the Wampanoags of the Hockomock region were part of. They typically described it as a great eagle, attributing storms to anger and good weather to its happiness. There are, however, more dark giant bird entities in Native American legend. The Illini tribe from Illinois had a creature called Piasa, which meant the bird that devours men. The Piasa was similar to the Thunderbird in appearance, but was known for carrying off large animals, humans, and children, which aren't humans, to devour them.
That's true, though.
The Wampanoags in the Cape Cod area of Massachusetts had similar legends. It was the summer of 1971, and Officer Thomas Downey was driving home after his shift just after midnight. He was going about 45 miles an hour down the long country road that had mostly woods on either side, with the occasional streetlight, when he noticed a man about 6 feet tall standing motionless on the side of the road. My ultimate nightmare. I used to come up with the most crazy things in my head when I was driving on long night roads by myself. As he approached the man, he saw enormous wings erupt from the dark figure, and it flew up over the treetops and was gone.
Oh, okay.
He tried to convince himself he'd seen some kind of stork or heron, but after going over the details in his head, he just couldn't convince himself of that. So he called the whole thing into the station.
How do you call that into the station? How do you say, you know what? I was writing down, like...
See, that's what I always say this, and I don't mean it in the sense that, like, I think that cops are more credible, but in the sense that they do not want to be thought of as not just being pragmatic and logical. And so to say, I saw a giant man turn into a bird and fly off, you know, like, right, he's not going to want to do that just for fun.
True.
If he does that, it's because he's serious. So anyway.
Okay, fair.
Well, I mean, I don't think that you were saying anything contrary, but it sounds now like I was trying to argue.
I know.
Okay, so this obviously opened him up to ridicule by just about everyone. But after the incident, Downey did a little investigation in the neighborhood and was surprised to find that many people in the neighborhood told him matter-of-factly that he was not the first or only one to see that exact thing.
That's crazy.
In doing research on thunderbirds and related phenomena, Downey found that there are similar sightings in the South, which are almost always closely tied to power lines or water towers, which is the case in this one as well. Another famous encounter occurred on July 25th, 1977, when a 10-year-old boy named Marlon was playing outside his home on a farm in Lawndale, Illinois. His mother and a few others who were gathered on the porch saw as two large birds suddenly began heading straight toward Marlon. One of them was able to grab him and carry him off 30 to 40 yards and then just dropped him and flew away. Now, that's fantastical, but it's
entirely
claims they say it's true. What could the Thunderbird be? The bird with the largest wingspan in the United States is the California condor, which comes in at 10 feet wingspan, but they're not at all over in the Bridgewater Triangle area, and they are still a lot smaller than the Thunderbird reports. So I'm not sure. Something else that is suggested is that it's a pterosaur or a prehistoric creature with a 30-foot plus wingspan
Jeez.
that has somehow managed to hang on and survive all this time, or teratorns, which is a species of giant condor-like birds that lived 8 million to 10,000 years ago. And another option, Mothman, an apparition with glowing red eyes that appears to be a harbinger of death and doom. And I don't really know. I can't tell you, but I will say this.
We need to do an episode on Mothman.
Well, but I will say this, that I was listening to Jim Harold's Campfire the other day, and a lady called in and had a thunderbird sighting. She was like, I have never told anyone this story because I feel like a lunatic, but I'm telling you right now, what I saw was not something that exists.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not saying that
is credible. Right.
That little story that I just told with no details is credible, but you know. Who knows? It just, and then she called it in because she heard someone else call, and she lives in the Bridgewater Triangle. So anyway, very interesting. I think if you live in this area, I would love to hear some stuff from you. Like, you know, if you have any stories, guess what we're doing? Listener Stories episode where you can read us your story. April 30th, 1976, in Abington, Massachusetts, Jimmy Beale was at home around 7 in the morning when his 12-year-old daughter went out to feed her pets and started screaming. Her beloved ponies were laying bloody and torn apart in the grass, and crouched over them was a large, dark creature. It looked like a dog, but was much, much larger than any dog she'd ever seen. Hearing his daughter, he ran toward the back of the house, and taking one look out the window, he grabbed his gun. He yelled at her to run and fired at the creature as it turned to flee. He thought he must have missed it because the thing ran into the woods and got away. The pair reported the incidents to the police, stating the dog looked like a cross between a Doberman and a German Shepherd and weighed over 150 pounds.
Oh my God, that sounds like the dire wolves at Skinwalker.
Yes. It does. Police officer Frank Curran spotted the beast later that day. He said he shot at it per his orders, but said he must have missed it because it walked away and into the woods, which also, yes, exactly the same. Tales of hellhounds have been around for thousands of years, and yet again, they are almost always seen as a sign that the witness is cursed, damned, or they or someone they know are going to die very soon, just like many of the other cryptids out there. Many cultures believe that the creature is an evil being or a demonic entity, yon, which is given away by the glowing red eyes, something that's also shared with the giant wolf dog at Skinwalker Ranch, and massive otherworldly size. While encounters with the giant dog are definitely less frequent today, there are sightings of another kind, one that we've spoken about on this very podcast, which is a jet black puma or panther, which is something that is clearly not found in the area. April 1978. Joe D'Andrade was at Claybanks Pond with his friend Wayne, trudging through the snow, exploring.
Ugh.
At one point, Wayne found...
What?
Just the snow? Is that it?
Ugh, yeah.
I know. At one point, Wayne found a dead squirrel stashed away in a hole with its lower jaw chewed away, leading them to think aloud that it was being saved for later, and then made them hastily stash it back inside and keep moving while sneaking glances over their shoulders because they weren't sure what was leaving it there to come back for.
Later? Why would that even be your thought?
I don't know, because, I mean, why was a half-eaten squirrel stuffed in a hole? They saw one giant print in the snow that had nothing around it or leading up to it, which is also a common theme here. That's when he spotted a giant, brown, hairy creature across the pond, only around 200 feet away. He said it was over 6 feet tall and 400 pounds. That's a big one. Well, shouldn't probably say that. I'll just leave that off. He was later told by his friend Miriam about his Native American family's legends that have been passed down regarding this creature and their ephemeral capabilities that allow them to travel by a secret chamber beneath the pond. This thing, of course, is the Sasquatch. So the Native American legend about creatures being able to travel through secret chambers beneath ponds and waterways is something that I have to say, like, it's one of those things where, sure, that's legend, and it's obviously a legend that's passed down through various different cultures, for sure. But to me, okay, again, where there's smoke, there's fire, and even though it's a legend, I feel like there's got to be something to that because so many paranormal encounters take place around bodies of water, and I'm even going to talk about some in a little while, evidence to show or to suggest that maybe things are coming up out of the water.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Okay.
Like, that may be the portal.
The water. Mm-hmm. See, my thing was always like the cave systems.
It could also be the cave systems.
The next one on our list is the Taunton State Hospital. Now, this was a psychiatric hospital that was established in 1854, and it is located on Hodges Avenue in Taunton, Massachusetts. And it was originally known as the State Lunatic Hospital at Taunton, so that's nice.
Yeah, that's good. That's a comforting, nice name.
It's warm.
Its architect, Elbridge Boyden, based the design for the building off of Dr. Thomas Kirkbride, who was inspiring some of the most beneficial institutes in the country at the time. Kirkbride himself has a legacy that seems to be creating buildings that trap spirits and attract paranormal activity. His flagship, Danvers State Hospital, if you've heard of it, is considered to be the single most haunted building in Massachusetts, and the number of structures in the state thought to be haunted within the Bridgewater Triangle has led to rumors that Kirkbride's involvement involved more than just architecture. It involved the occult. Ooh.
Some of the stories surrounding the hospital include those of satanic rituals that had been carried out in the basement by the doctors and nurses using the unwilling patients for the proceedings, and since then it is believed that the basement area has long been consumed by a, quote, shadowy figure who would come out and crawl on the walls to watch the patients in the hospital.
Ew. Fuck you, crawling on the walls.
It's the satanic part that I'm like, ugh.
Oh,
okay.
yeah. I was more so just thinking about some shadowy crawling
figure
on the wall.
Yeah.
Although those stories cannot be substantiated per se, what is known is that the practices of the institution followed the ideas and attitudes toward mental health and evolved with them. So, when doctors were dunking people in extreme cold in order to, quote, jolt them out of their ailments, that was done at the hospital. When frontal lobotomies were all the rage, so it was done at Taunton. Electroshock therapy came after that, and the culmination of those things mixed with the intense energies of the patient and the possibility of whatever else was going on there may have really imprinted some serious energy on the hospital that would kind of pave the way for these experiences.
So psychiatric hospitals are frequently associated with paranormal activity of the haunting kind, and Taunton really is no exception. Some notable patients of the hospital include Anthony Santo, who was an Italian-American murderer who was diagnosed with having hallucinations. I think you just mentioned him a couple minutes ago. And Jane Toppin, who was an angel of death serial killer who took the life of at least 12 women, although she confessed to 31. And Lizzie Borden claimed to have been held there, but there are no official records that exist substantiating that.
And Lizzie Borden is a significant aspect of the Bridgewater Triangle in most stories, but we're not going to talk about it today.
At all.
Why is that, I wonder? I don't know.
It could be a huge hint.
In a story from a former patient, a juvenile who was arrested and made a deal to serve his time at Taunton, he managed to escape the building one night and was going to hide in the cemetery on the property for the night. He said he felt cold hands on his shoulder, and he raised his arms overhead thinking he'd been caught. As he turned around, he found there was no one there, but in his ear, he heard a gasping, "Leave!" And he ran back to the hospital and turned himself in, which I think, if that's true, is fairly significant that he's like, I escaped. And then he was like, fuck this. Something's out here with me. I'm going back. A former hospital worker named Jackie said that he saw fog in the basement that moved like a human. He was told he was imagining it. The second time he saw it, it clearly took the form of a dark, smoky shadow man, and Jackie quit. He's not alone. Many have reported seeing a shadow man in the halls. Like you said, oftentimes it will be crawling along the wall as if it's pulling himself forward. Yuck. But we heard that on The Hat Man, actually, if you want to go back and listen to our interview with director Kyle of the Hat Man documentary.
A fire eventually broke out in the hospital in 2006, long after it had been closed, and was eventually completely demolished in 2009.
Interestingly enough, there have been fires that are breaking out at these hospitals and asylums throughout Massachusetts, and the cause is not entirely known at this point. It's obviously speculated that there's a million different possibilities.
Of course.
It probably is something like there's hoodlums going around, or
I'm sure.
vagrants. Teenagers.
Hoodlums. I love that you're from 1942. And vagrants. Freetown State Forest is known as the Cursed Forest of Massachusetts.
Let's go there. That sounds like a friendly place.
In 1978, the corpse of 15-year-old Mary Lou Arruda was found tied to a tree in the woods. She had been abducted from Raynham, nearby, about 2 months earlier. In 1980, police were investigating a murder near the forest and were approached by locals who claimed to have witnessed satanic cult activity in the woods.
Satan!
Additionally, in the early 80s, Carl Drew, who was a pimp working in Fall River, allegedly murdered several of his workers and dumped their bodies in the forest as well.
Fuck you, Carl. Carl,
I know, that's exactly what I was thinking. Some believed that these reports were connected to the Fall River cult killings that occurred during the same period.
Is that a band?
It is. And suspicious clearings stained with animal blood were found in the Freetown forest. The arranged carcasses of cattle were later discovered in the woods, lending more steam to the rumors of ritual sacrifice within the forest.
Let's be honest. Does any old sacrificing fella have enough energy to arrange carcasses of cattle in the forest?
They're so heavy.
God damn it.
They're much heavier than people think.
They're like almost, they're like 1,000 pounds.
Exactly.
Is like a normal big old
cattle.
Come on.
In 1987, a homeless man was mistaken for an undercover police officer, somehow, and was killed in the forest. And in 2001, 2 men were found riddled with bullets on Bell Rock Road, which winds through the woods. In 2006, reports of roving and aggressive dogs plagued the area. And in the same year, an escaped emu
Get out of the way of the emu!
was spotted.
He's coming for ya!
Was spotted, wandering through the forest and rushing at visitors.
Yeah, they're fucking creepy looking. Yeah, if you had a little emu head pop up in your window, you'd sure should be scared.
For sure. And as recently as May of 2016, wires were found stretched across frequently traveled paths through the woods. The wires with a sinister purpose, which was to catch off-road motorbike riders across the neck and likely to decapitate them.
Whoa, dude. Take it down.
It's pretty
about
nefarious.
95% there.
Yeah, it's
Forrest.
pretty bad.
Those are just probably wild men.
Well, I don't even know if wild men. They're just fucking assholes.
Well, they might just be wild. I just can't imagine. I feel like if you're doing that, you're like out there living in the woods, eating raw squirrel, and there's bacteria and viruses in your stomach. There's like worms eating you from the inside out, and so you're like, I gotta take people's heads off while they ride their bikes.
Fair.
Okay.
The supernatural reputation of this forest is equally as formidable. President Ronald Reagan himself.
Boo from the front. Boo from the back. Boo from the left. Boo from the right. Go home. Thank you. This message was approved by Ashley Hamilton. I approve this message.
You know what? Wait, side note. Real quick. I just want to talk about political campaigns and how people are like, whatever.
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden has done this, that, and this. And Joe Biden, da-da-da-da-da. I am Joe Biden. I approve this message. Of course you approve the message. Of course you do. Regardless of if it's Joe Biden or Trump, they're both fucking garbage.
Garbage.
Complete garbage. But, like, it's just so funny how politics is so stupid.
Yeah. While the cities burned, Joe Biden took a knee.
Oh, you've seen that commercial 20 million times too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fuck me.
Anyways, President Ronald Reagan himself reported seeing strange lights in the sky within the forest.
Oh, shit.
Many people believe that the forest exerts a dark influence that drives people to suicide, while even older legends assert that Pukwudgies, humanoid creatures from Wampanoag native tradition, are known to stalk the woods. And I know of Pukwudgies from Harry Potter.
Oh, that's what I saw when I was like reading about this. So I don't know anything about Harry Potter, but I've seen the movies. I would never have been able to tell you, oh yeah, Pukwudgie from Harry Potter.
And then there's Profile Rock, which is also known as Old Man of Joshua's Mountain.
That easy to roll off the tongue name.
No. I mean, yes. This was a 50-foot high granite rock formation located in Freetown, Massachusetts, near the Freetown State Forest.
People come from all over New England to see the perfectly preserved face found naturally in the rock. It's Massachusetts' Old Man in the Mountain.
Local Wampanoags believe it to be the image of Chief Massasoit, who was a close friend to the early Pilgrim settlers.
Massasoit was the leader of the Wampanoags during the Pilgrims' arrival to Plymouth, and it's thought that the spirit trapped at Profile Rock may be his son, Philip.
It's also said that from the top of Profile Rock, Wampanoag warriors could send smoke signals to Metacom in Bristol, Rhode Island, and is a hotbed for Bigfoot sightings as well. And sightings of warriors can still be seen atop the rock today.
The rock was a sacred place to the tribe, as they would use it in the ways that Bianca just mentioned, but also met there to discuss important matters and was used as a... I'm going to read that over. The rock was a sacred place to the tribe, as they would use it in the ways that Bianca just mentioned, but also met there to discuss important matters and was used as a lookout spot during the war. It is believed that the profile's resemblance to Massasoit may have attracted Philip to it during the darkest days of the war, as he may have felt some connection to it. It said he went there the night before he died and that he knew his fate. It's possible the grief he released praying and meditating there that night may have left a strong imprint of energy in that spot, explaining some of the reports of sightings there. There have been several reports of people seeing a man on top of Profile Rock, sitting with his leg. Okay. There have been several reports of people seeing a man on top of Profile Rock, sitting with his legs crossed and eyes closed. When anyone approaches, he disappears literally before their eyes. One local named Richard said that he's seen the man 5 separate times. He said the last time he saw him, the man actually turned and looked at him for the first time. He said he was far enough away that he couldn't see a lot of detail, but he knew that the man was looking at him. Then he just got up and leapt off the cliff. When Richard ran up to the edge to see, there was no sign of anyone, no sound, there was no splattered body anywhere, nothing. But he swears he saw this man jump off the cliff.
The Assonet Ledge is thought to be the most haunted stone area in the Triangle, with the number of reports and sightings there making it an elite location in New England's supernatural hotspots. It is a granite cliff, and people believe that the granite itself is haunted. It is believed to be one of the forest's most haunted spots, and is said to have evil spirits living within it. In fact, Taunton State Hospital was actually constructed with the Assonet Ledge granite.
Wow. The ledge was the scene of a tragedy in 1900 when the site was used as a quarry and blacksmith shop and one day blew up after some of the dynamite ignited. The explosion killed several men and forced production to shut down.
There have been at least 18 confirmed suicides from the top of the ledge itself.
Yikes, doodle. That's okay. So some of these suicides, they say that there were witnesses there who said it was completely unexplainable. Like they were just hanging out and then all of a sudden the person just like went and just dove off the cliff. Mm-hmm. More disturbingly, in off the record statements from local law enforcement, many of them believe that there are much more bodies buried beneath the surface of the water, as no one knows for sure how deep it actually goes, and the temperature of the water has prevented any divers from finding out for certain.
Oh, it's really that cold.
Crazy.
That's nuts. But there's dry suits. It's not like you can't go out in a dry suit.
This might have been back in 1970.
Okay, fair. So, like Ashley just said, it's sometimes unexplainable with people like randomly jumping off the cliff, because there are others who have reported feeling suicidal with a strong desire to jump when at the top.
People say that when they go out there, even if they're feeling perfectly normal, they are struck with an overwhelming sadness, feelings of heaviness or despair. And like you said, many say that they have the inexplicable urge to jump off the edge, which is so bizarre, but also kind of reminds me of the lemmings and stuff. Like,
oh, yeah. What? But they were pushed off the ledge.
All the lemmings were pushed?
Yes.
Oh.
You didn't know that?
No.
Oh, yeah. That's like a huge thing. They were pushed off the ledge to like create that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's awful. I didn't know that.
It's the worst.
Okay. Fuck. The ledge is a popular party spot for local teens, and many have reported seeing individuals jump off or lights going over the edge, only to never hear a splash in the water after that. So very, very suspicious. But also that lights thing, I mean, that's starting to become a more compelling sighting to me than I previously would have given it credence for. I'm like, oh, these light balls.
Yeah. Yeah.
They happen.
Light balls. The most predominant tale of Assinet Ledge involves the Lady of the Ledge, who is said to be a Wampanoag princess who threw herself from the ledge when her father would not allow her to marry the man that she loved, who was white.
I did not read all of the information about that. So what I had read said that she felt scorned because he was supposed to meet her up there, and then his parents didn't allow it, and she thought he scorned her, so she jumped off the ledge, which I was like, or versus spending another day without him, which I was like, come on, lady. Like, maybe he was that fine, but I guarantee you can find another good one out there. Yeah.
Additionally, there have been reports of ghostly figures plummeting from the top of the ledge, and there have been reports of mysterious lights seen rising from the depths of the water below the ledge.
Cece?
Speculations saying that this may be a USO, an unidentified submerged object, or a pukwudgie from Wampanoag mythology.
Or who knows what else coming through the portal. It is also, because if you remember back to Skinwalker Ranch, there was some serious lake situations where things were going in the water after they were flying around in the air. They would dip into the water and disappear, or they would come out of it. So this is, again, same thing. It is also believed that pukwudgies play an important part in the hauntings because they are said to lure people to the rocky cliff and then push them over like a couple little sons of bitches, I would say.
Copycut Road is an isolated road running 7 miles through the forest and is one of the anchors of the Bridgewater Triangle. There is a tale regarding the mad trucker of Copycut Road.
The mad trucker.
Oh, mad trucker.
Copycat Road just sounds like a, hey man, I'm over here. I got it. Let's go.
What do you got, sir?
I don't know.
The tale regarding this mad trucker is that when driving down the road late at night, you or the witness will see headlights in their rearview mirror and hear the blaring of a truck's air horn as the swerving vehicle tries to pass you. And once you do finally find a safe spot to pull over and let them pass, the truck completely vanishes.
What a dick.
There is a school that was a one-room schoolhouse in Rehoboth that was built originally in 1862, operating until 1937. The historic site is supposedly one of paranormal experiences ranging from the laughter of disembodied children to an entire classroom full of specters in 19th century clothing, attentively listening to a teacher.
Yeah, there was like a lady that told a story about how she visited the school. She's a teacher and she thought it was interesting. And she was looking through the window and saw a teacher teaching to a full class full of students, and she waited outside the door because she thought, oh, I'm going to let them finish which I'm like, what did you think they were doing in there? I'm going to let them finish their lesson, and then I'm going to go in and talk to the teacher. And she waited and waited and waited. There was only one door, which she was standing by, and then eventually she was like, well, what the heck's going on here? She opened the door. No one was inside.
I gotta tell you, I do not want to listen to disembodied children laughing.
No.
There's nothing worse than that.
Yeah.
There's Route 44 in Seekonk, which is an east-west highway that runs 237 miles. Radios have been known to scan randomly, fade in and out, and sometimes end on the sound of a man's laugh. There is also the story of the red-headed hitchhiker,
which is one of the most famous sightings. It is a red-headed hitchhiker walking along Route 44. Some have stopped and picked him up, and he disappears miles down the road while he's in their car. People typically see a well-built man between 45 and 55 wearing red flannel, jeans, and work boots. Sometimes has a beard, sometimes doesn't, and he sounds fine, if you ask me.
He sounds like Ben Kissel.
Well-built?
Bill? Oh, well-built.
Well-built is like, I work out in the field, I chop lumber all day, and I wear flannel.
Maybe definitely not.
Some witnesses say his eyes are normal, while others say that they don't look right. They're either black and lifeless or glowing. Many witnesses report swerving to miss the man, and he's not there after the fact. While most encounters are perfectly benign, some have reported more aggressive activity. One man said he attempted to pick the man up one day, and the hitchhiker just yelled at him, then disappeared. Then, laughing came from all directions around him as he walked back to his car, because he had gotten out of his car to talk to him, the guy yelled at him, and then as he's walking back to his car, laughing. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I would be... Hopefully that guy just wasn't losing his shit. And like you said, a woman claimed after encountering the man that he spoke to her through her radio afterwards, which, stay out of my fucking car, dude. Get out of my car.
And then there's the story of another rock, the Anawan Rock, also off of Route 44. According to the author of Haunted Massachusetts, Thomas D'Agostino, the legend of the rock started when Chief Anawan chose that area for his encampment during the waning days of King Philip's War in 1676. Anawan and his group of warriors took refuge from the colonists' advancements for days until August 28th of 1676, when his men, tired and hungry, surrendered to General Benjamin Church without resistance. Although Church promised that the Wampanoag Sachem could go free as a result of his surrender, his colleagues were less forgiving. The men were subsequently slaughtered, and Anawan was beheaded. D'Agostino wrote, as a sign of victory for the colonies, his head was hung from a pole at Burial Hill, which was at that time a fort. It stayed there for about 3 years.
Good grief.
And it appears that the spirits of those captured now remain at the rock to wreak vengeance on the white man's betrayal of justice. Native ghosts have been seen darting through the woods by visitors to the site, and tourists to the rock see and smell smoke from a campfire, even though there is no sign of any such flames to be seen. Additionally, there are accounts of phantom fires, phantom drum beats, and a disembodied voice that yells Iutash, which is said to be a Wampanoag phrase meaning stand and fight, reported in the area, lending further credence to the claim that witnesses see native ghosts darting through the woods.
A man named Tom said the first time he went to the rock, he smelled an odd odor like a thunderstorm kind of smell. Then he noticed a fire at the base of the stone only 10 feet away from him. He watched it grow bigger and bigger even though it gave off no heat or sound until it eventually just vanished. Then there was a woman named Luann who said that she went out to the area in an effort to explore, but also to connect with her Native American heritage. She and her partner went out one evening and began recording. Soon after they arrived, they began to hear a swishing noise in the forest all around them. As time went on, it almost seemed like it was pants swishing as they were seeing movement all around them in the trees. Although she didn't mention what she was perceiving to her partner voiced the exact same sentiments to her, which she agreed. At one point, she turned in the direction of one of the swishing noises and thought she saw a tall, thin Native American man leaning against a tree and then vanish. In the recordings they made that night, they recorded someone saying "knee tomp," which was the Wampanoag word for friend, which they had made a point to learn and say at the beginning of their venture into the woods. Many people report these phantom drum beats that Bianca mentioned and chanting that is typically not decipherable because it's in another language. And this reminded me of that recording that we listened to of those hunters who recorded that bizarre chanting in the woods in the 70s, which I would say, let's put it here. No. But it doesn't fit here, really. Actually, I don't really know where that was. If it's in Bridgewater, I'll do it. Otherwise, we'll save it for the missing 411. We can do it in both. If it's in Bridgewater, we'll do it in both.
Another location is the Shad Pond Factory. The actual name of the factory was the Orleans Manufacturing Company. It was built on the site of an old gristmill in 1810, and fine cloth was made there with cotton purchased from New Orleans. The mill burned down in 1831 and was rebuilt, and then burned down again in 1884, and many have reported seeing the spirit of an old man replete in 19th century clothing, hovering around the area of the establishment, appearing out of nowhere and disappearing when confronted. Many think that the ghost is a former factory worker or the person who was responsible for the tragic fire.
A group of people reported seeing this old man standing in the ruins in old-fashioned clothing. They called out to him and watched as he slowly just faded out of existence. A week later, one of those same women in that first sighting went back to the ruins and saw the old man once again. This time, he vanished, then reappeared a few feet behind her. She ran away in fear, but a year later went back, and the exact same situation happened again. Instead, this time she didn't run off. The man then just disappeared after he passed her, so it definitely seems like this is more of a residual haunting, just replaying a scene over and over again versus a intelligent haunting that's actually like interactive and not just doing the same imprint of whatever they did at the time. I'm thinking it's maybe just a man that, you know, like they think it's a man that was there either doing something. Maybe he worked there and he did that same thing every single day, and that just got imprinted into the the
The
fabric
land.
of time. Another man was on the other side of the pond beside the factory ruins. There's a pond beside the factory, and he was on the other side of it. He suddenly heard a man yelp, and when he followed the noise, he saw a man in midair, as if it had just jumped out of a window of a building that didn't exist anymore. He said the ghost vanished when it hit the water of the pond without a splash. Yeah.
Ugh.
Weird, but also like
Kinda
another, yeah, pretty cool, but another one of those residual things
Yeah.
where it's like, that might have been the man jumping out of a burning building.
Sure. Palmer's River Churchyard contains Revolutionary War graves where misty figures have been seen walking around, and one report is of a grayish-black figure that wanders. There are reports of giant orbs, and witnesses claim to have also heard the crying of a child in the cemetery.
Take
which I hate.
it out of here.
I hate.
Get it out of
I
here.
don't like it.
No. People have reported seeing strange things here for more than 3 decades, long before the recent developments to the land nearby. Writer Charles Robinson wrote of a young ghost boy who was, quote, grotesque, that would stare and then vanish completely.
Hate that too. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't need it.
This has been seen by people who have never even read Robinson's book, that they end up reporting this exact thing to a T, like describing the child who obviously like was burnt or something. And that's why they're saying that. But a woman named Christy used to go to cemeteries as a kid to write and read. She said her home life was chaotic and she found it calming and liked to be outside, which at first I was like weirdo, but then I was like, I did the same thing. I used to go hang out in cemeteries.
Ooh, edgy.
I didn't mean to be edgy. Like, okay, so I wonder if my ex listens to the show, but my ex Kristen, who I would still be friends with to this day if we lived in the same spot, because she is truly one of my like soul connections in life. She and I would go, this is terrible. We were low life scum at age 20. Go and just get drunk at like cemeteries at like midnight. We'd be there in the middle of the night, just drunk as hell, stumbling all over the place. Those kinds of experiences, though, do make me go, if there is supernatural stuff
Wouldn't
out
I have
there,
seen it then?
why in the hell at 3 a.m. at the cemetery, just drunk as a jaybird, relaxed? You know, why would I not? But who knows? I could have been closed off still for some reason. Anyway. She came to Palmer's cemetery one day and said for the first time in her life she felt uncomfortable in a cemetery. She saw a little boy that ducked behind a headstone and laughed.
I don't need it.
And she called out to him and looked for him everywhere but could not find him.
I don't need that at all.
On another visit, she took a recorder and upon listening when she got home, found that she'd recorded the voice of a woman crying that had not been going on when she was there. And on yet another occasion, she recorded a deep male voice saying, "People shouldn't be here."
I hate that. Nope. I don't need any of that.
Hearing stuff is very frightening to me. I don't want to think about it at all. So the next thing we're going to talk about, which I know might seem a little bit silly, unlike the rest of this, are zombies. And although they have been played the fuck out in pop culture, zombies, or what we now call zombies, were common figures in various cultures around the world for centuries. They did not eat brains or travel in predatory packs seeking flesh, but were more so dead beings that simply did not know that they had died.
I thought zombie came from a voodoo practice. Sorry, are you going to go into it? I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I'm the fucking worst.
No, you're not at all.
Like,
Because you're just interacting.
Sorry.
No. Southeastern Massachusetts has a large Portuguese population and tends to attract Portuguese-speaking people, particularly from Brazil and Cape Verdean. Both of these cultures have a strong link to Santeria and voodoo, which we've I knew I couldn't say it regular, which we've spoken about fairly well in our episode on hoodoo. But they are forms of witchcraft which originated in Africa, much like everything in the world, and mixed with Catholicism, to put it very roughly. Palo
Mayombe.
Is the negative side of these practices, and zombies are an integral part of the religion. Apparently, priests or medicine men use paralyzing drugs to convince the community that someone has died, then digs the person up and uses his power of suggestion to control the resurrected. What the fuck? I think? I mean, I hope I'm not stepping on toes here. Then they convince the person that their soul is now the priest's. Some people believe that this act does actually steal a person's soul, but who really knows about that? All that said, people in Freetown, Massachusetts have reported being chased by people whose eyes seem vacant and looked like they'd been buried underground. One woman thought she'd encountered a ghost while walking a trail in the woods, and it was a man who followed her at a steady pace while walking with a slight limp. He was completely covered in dirt. She said that even though he was sliding his legs in the dirt and appeared to be breathing incredibly heavy, she heard no sound come from him or his movements whatsoever.
Ugh.
What the fuck?
Ugh.
But I will say that the absence of sound is a very common element in supernatural occurrences that take place in woods. If you pay attention to them, a lot of the times people will say the reason why they got kind of tipped off to the fact that something weird was happening was because
there was no sound.
Everything went completely silent. No bugs, no wind, like nothing. And that's heard over and over and over.
Now that you say that, I do remember like reading stuff about that, how all of a sudden there was no sounds.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Everything was eerily quiet
right.
or something, whatever.
Yeah. So in that, it makes me feel like the dimensional thing has to play some part here. Otherwise, why would we not hear it in our own
right.
dimension? In yet another story, a group of friends who were taking a walk through the woods came across a woman that was wearing clothes that were super outdated, and she was so dirty that puffs of dirt actually rose off of her when she moved. Jordan, is that you?
I was just thinking Pigpen. I swear to God, I was like, Pigpen? But Jordan?
Is that you?
That's where Jordan is.
Jordan! You're in the forest in Massachusetts. We need to come save you. Put out an SOS. We'll see it. They said her eyes were lifeless and she didn't react, speak, or alter her course whenever they called out to her multiple times. She was coming straight for them. There was 2 men and 2 women, and they were scared of this lady. They said she left them feeling super uneasy even though they were 4 against 1. So they were left to literally run back to their car and away from her. But before they could close the door, the woman had attempted to pull one of the guys from the back seat with what he described as superhuman strength.
Oh my God.
He must have either been one fine honey or she was on PCP. Those are the only options.
Those are the 2.
There's other random paranormal sightings, like a rogue lioness that goes around killing livestock and roaming the streets, that panther I spoke about, so many haunted homes that we honestly,
no, there's no way.
We would have to do an entire episode on haunted homes
houses, yeah.
in itself, and I felt like the land was a little more compelling for this.
I guess that's what I focused on too, was land.
Yeah.
I didn't really focus on any of the haunted houses
cases. There were so many.
Interesting.
We could do another episode, obviously, of this later, not in this Halloween series, but later on in future years of the houses, because there was a ton of creepy situations. It was just like, how do you pick, one haunted house situation out of like a million of them? So we are left to ask, what makes the area metaphysically unique and active? One of the elements that we've spoken about already is the element of water, which is a sacred one in many spiritual rites and ceremonies. Often thought to be due to the energy it conducts that beings from other dimensions or realms or what have you are able to use to gain strength for communication or visibility or whatever they need to do in order to make themselves known. Another factor is the earth itself. As writer Peter Towe says, it appears from time to time that there are brief openings between our physical world and the spirit world, where certain beings can pass through from their plane of existence to ours. Additionally, there are alleged well-established methods in which certain individuals can summon beings from other worlds to bring them into our own, or make passage into those realms themselves. I know that Bianca's over there going, oh, are there? Maybe not.
That's fine.
Throughout recorded history, individuals who claim to have made this passage into these other realms, such as shamans, have consistently described their journey, starting by going down through openings in the ground that exist in our physical world as things like holes, cracks, caves, caverns of water, and springs. The Mayans believed that their underground caverns, linked to the water table in underground rivers called cenotes, were portals to Xibalba, or place of fright, or the underworld. They believed that this was the home to sinister gods of death and disease. In other words, they believed these natural wells of water led to the same evil entity that the Wampanoag knew as Hockomock.
Real quick, I just want to say, cenotes are the most beautiful places to dive.
Yeah, I've been in. Yeah, I really did enjoy it, and it was really cool. But I was like, what could be down here?
But you know what?
Also, they say there's disease. The water is super polluted now.
Maybe
it is. I read an article about it because I was like, I love them. And then I read and they were like, you can get skin-eating bacteria.
Oh, wow. I loved it. The best dives that my family and I ever did were in cenotes.
Did you actually dive?
Yeah, scuba diving.
Creeps.
Why?
You creeps.
Oh, yeah. So when you were doing your Brandon Lawson episode.
Not Brandon Lawson, Ben McDaniel.
Ben McDaniel, whatever. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. When you were doing your Ben McDaniel episode, I was like, bitch, I dive. Fuck you.
You don't dive like that.
Well, I don't dive irresponsibly. You always have to have a dive master. PSA, always have a dive master for scuba diving. Okay,
here we go. So we need to finish here. So for our third and most obvious, I think, aspect of this area that makes this active, we need to look no further than the name itself. This was a place where the Wampanoag considered sacred and buried their dead, with the evidence of the prehistoric civilizations, the single most serious Native American burial site in the country. And, you know, that's touted around every time there's a haunting. You hear that it's an old Native American burial site, bidding site. But this is truly,
for sure,
we know 100%.
For sure.
And I mean, what in the world is going on in this Bridgewater Triangle? There's also a Bennington Triangle.
Oh, there is a Bennington Triangle. We should do that one too. Oh. There's so many triangles.
All these triangles going around. But anyway, so yeah, that is intense, man. That is very similar to Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, it is.
Just more of like a collective of various, like, absolute just what is going on.
I really liked doing this because it was so many, not consistencies, but so many synchronicities, like, just between everything.
Right.
And so many synchronicities between other paranormal things that we've seen before, too, like the water and obviously the land being sacred. I love doing episodes like this because you are given so much more information and it lends so much more credence to past episodes that we've done.
Yes. See, that's something that as I have done the show, I've become more and more, you'll all hear me say it, but I'm like, everything is connected. Every single thing we talk about is connected to something else that we talked about. And it just becomes more and more clear. So it's cool because it's fun to see you discover these things just like I have. And I'm still discovering lots of things. Not to say that I've discovered it all, obviously. Right. But it's just cool to see you grow in your paranormal, whatever.
Dude, I'd love to do, you know what I want to do really bad is an episode on the Mayans specifically.
Oh, yeah.
When my parents and I would travel to, the Yucatan Peninsula to do diving, we would also go to the ruins. And my dad has my dad's a huge UFO guy. And that's where I got my whole thing. So like he would buy like scrolls of like the old, that old portrait of like a man that looks like he's essentially piloting a rocket ship. So we have like stuff like that, and the house used to be like ancient Egyptian themed. It was like it was a mess. My mom fixed it. Okay. It's fine. But like I would love to do ancient civilizations and ancient mythology at some point in the show.
I mean, we already are.
I mean, clearly we are.
But yes, I agree.
We just talked about Henry Cavill again on Patreon.
Oh my
and
God.
Had the funnest time laughing.
Give me that mustache, please. I can't believe it, you guys. Like, I don't understand. All of you that pick that long-haired, non-mustached Henry Cavill. I don't get it.
Well, let me tell you, there's a certain type of breed that listens to true crime. And we all like the broody boys.
Jeez, I guess that guy made a switch over or something. Like, I don't know what the deal is.
But it's fine. My mom likes hunky boys too, so you're on the same page with her.
Yes, me and your mother both do like hunky boys. I do know this as a fact.
All right. So if you want to join us over on Patreon, we are www.patreon.com/creepitrealpod. If you want to join us on Instagram, we are at creepitrealpod. If you want to join us over on Facebook,
go to our website.
Yes, actually,
creepitrealpod.com, and you can get links to all of our social media and our email. You can email us just right from the site. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so
have a great life.
Have a great everything.
Creep it real.
Creep it real.